children's stories, and you go on the adventures yourself as a child. It takes you into a sort of multitude of different worlds. My sister and brother and I, we always used to go off and camp and pretend we were.
Laura Lopes, Queen Camilla's daughter, has always remained far from the royal spotlight. But not anymore. After years of hushed whispers and unanswered speculation, she has finally spoken, confirming the very rumors insiders desperately tried to bury. Her words have sent shockwaves through royal circles, dragging her mother's world into a storm of questions no one expected. So, what exactly did she reveal, and why now? Buckle up as we dive into the truth that could forever change. The royal conversation, the whisper that never died. For decades, Queen Camilla's story has been told in fragments, sometimes as scandal, sometimes as gossip, and sometimes as prophecy. Long before she ever stepped inside Buckingham Palace as queen consort, whispers followed her like a crown, forged not of jewels, but of shadows. They were never loud, never official, but always there, echoing through newspapers, dinner parties, and even inside palace walls. At the center of them all lingered one haunting question. What does Camilla truly want? To many, she was the woman who stole the heart of a future king. To others, she was a survivor enduring public hatred, tabloid cruelty, and years of scrutiny only to emerge as one of Britain's most powerful figures. But behind the image of resilience, there has always been suspicion that Camilla's rise was not only about love or duty, but about power. Real power. The kind that doesn't just make you queen, but secures your family's place in history. The rumors began in the 1980s, when Camilla was still seen as Charles's forbidden companion. Even then, insiders whispered she wielded unusual influence over him, that she could sway his choices in ways no advisor, no courtier, not even Diana herself, ever could. When Diana famously said their marriage was a bit crowded, many believed she wasn't just speaking of Charles's affection, but warning of Camilla's strategic presence. As the years rolled on, the whispers only grew louder. After Diana's death in 1997, questions resurfaced. Would Camilla now step forward? And if she did, would she bring only herself or her family, her children, her inner circle into the orbit of royal power? Every step seemed to fuel the narrative. By the time Charles married her in 2005, whispers hardened into belief. Camilla was not simply a companion, but a strategist playing the long game. Charles's coronation in 2023 reignited those suspicions. Though the spotlight was meant for the king, many noticed how comfortably Camilla carried herself, how assuredly she moved through spaces once thought untouchable. She had survived scandal, outlasted Diana's legacy in the public eye, and silenced critics who swore she'd never be accepted. Still, whispers persisted. Was acceptance enough for her, or was there more she wanted? The sharpest whisper of all was this: Camilla's ambitions did not end with her. She wanted not only a crown on her head, but influence that stretched her children, her bloodline, perhaps even a dynasty running parallel to the Windsors, a dynasty where her lineage, not Diana's, would quietly rise. That was the whisper that refused to die. And now, for the first time, it has been echoed not by outsiders, but by her own daughter. And if gossip can be ignored, what happens when the echo comes from within? Keep watching. Laura's words changed everything. Laura's accidental confession, the confirmation didn't come from critics or commentators. It came from Queen Camilla's daughter, Laura Lopes, and in a single sentence, she may have revealed more than she intended. That is how Laura Hoot has lived quietly as an art curator. Far from palace, drama suddenly found herself at the center of a royal firestorm. For years, speculation about Camilla's ambitions had been dismissed as gossip. But when the words came from her family, they carried a weight that could not be denied. It happened in the most ordinary setting. Laura, known as a mother and art curator, far from palace intrigue, slipped in a moment of casual honesty. She reportedly said, "Well, Mom's making sure the family will soon have their place." It wasn't meant as a proclamation, nor said to shock, but precisely because it sounded so casual, it struck deeply. Her phrasing suggested something deliberate, hinting at strategy, as if a plan was already in motion. What place was she referring to, and why phrase it as something her mother was making sure of, rather than letting it happen naturally? The words spread fast, dissected by royal watchers, journalists, and online forums. Some dismissed it as harmless pride. Others heard something far darker, confirmation that whispers of Camilla's hidden ambitions were not fantasy, but conversations inside her own home. What made Laura's words powerful was their source. She has never sought attention, never chased headlines like her stepbrothers. She grew up outside palace walls, rarely speaking of her mother's royal role. That's exactly why her words felt unfiltered, uncensored, almost honest. For a brief moment, it was as if the mask slipped. Buckingham's guarded walls cracked just enough for the public to glimpse what might really be unfolding. Decades of whispers about Camilla's ambitions suddenly had a voice in one that couldn't be ignored. If Laura's words were more than a slip, then were they Camilla's true plan revealed? Keep watching, reading between the lines. When Laura said her mother was making sure the family will soon have their place, it sounded innocent. But in the monarchy, where every word is measured, nothing is taken lightly. The question now is clear. Was it a slip or the kind of truth that only escapes after being spoken too often at home? To understand the weight of Laura's words, we must remember Camilla's history. For decades, she was underestimated by those who thought she'd remain in the background. Yet time and again, she proved she could quietly shift power. From the scandal-ridden days of being Charles's secret companion to her gradual rise into royal acceptance, Camilla's journey has been built on patience, persistence, and remarkable timing. Yet they've often been given places of prominence at major events. At Charles's coronation, both stood proudly among the most senior figures of the family. They wore no crowns, held no titles, but their presence was undeniable. A silent statement that Camilla's children were no longer bystanders, but woven into the royal picture. For many, Laura's remark now casts new light on those moments. Were they mere acts of courtesy from King Charles or deliberate steps in a longer plan? Each appearance slowly laying the groundwork for greater acceptance of Camilla's family. Inside royal life, it grows harder to dismiss the possibility now that her own daughter has voiced it so openly. Critics argue Laura's words could not have come from nowhere. It is unlikely she invented them. More plausibly, they reflect conversations at home, where Camilla may have spoken of securing a permanent place for her children and grandchildren. If that is true, then Laura's slip is not just careless, it is a glimpse into Camilla's private ambitions. Defenders of the Queen Consort insist it may have been nothing more than a proud daughter speaking loosely, unguarded by the caution royals are trained to uphold. But even they cannot deny this reality. Once spoken, such words cannot be retracted. They linger, forcing every seating plan, every invitation, every public appearance to be re-examined under suspicion. Laura's remark has, in effect, made the public read between the lines of Camilla's every move. What once looked like coincidence now appears deliberate. What once seemed like quiet support now appears strategic. The question is no longer whether Camilla is securing her own place, it is whether she is paving the way for a dynasty of her own making, a family quietly rising in the shadows. If Laura's words were truly a slip, then they reveal a reality already unfolding in plain sight: the steady rise of Camilla's children, Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles. Though not royal by blood, their presence is increasingly visible, their appearances at high-profile events harder to dismiss. What once could be brushed off as courtesy now feels like carefully staged steps in a broader plan. Look at the coronation of 2023. King Charles III's historic day drew the world's eyes. Yet some noticed something unusual. While William and Catherine stood at the heart of the ceremony with their children, Laura and Tom were positioned with striking prominence. They wore no regalia, bore no titles, but their placement sent a message. They were part of the inner circle, acknowledged as belonging in a way no gossip could erase. And it wasn't the first time. Over the years, both Laura and Tom have been present at royal weddings, trooping the color and state occasions. Their presence, once explained away as family courtesy, slowly normalized them in the public eye. Their faces became familiar, their roles more natural, bit by bit. The idea of Camilla's children inside the royal fabric stopped feeling odd. Tom Parker Bowles has carved his own influence. As a respected food critic and author, he moves easily among Britain's elite dining, with aristocrats advising on food culture and building networks that matter as much as titles. Laura, meanwhile, as an art curator, has shaped her career in galleries and exhibitions where patrons overlap with the highest circles of society. Their careers give them access, their appearances give them visibility, and together they anchor Camilla's family closer to royal power. Compare this to the carefully managed rise of William and Catherine's children. George, Charlotte, and Louis are groomed with precision, every public step calculated to reinforce continuity, to present them as the crown's future. Their presence is never casual, it is strategic. In contrast, Laura and Tom's presence feels unscripted, yet that very informality makes them appear more natural, quietly embedded in royal life. Thus, two tracks have formed. On one side, William and Catherine's polished family, destined for the throne. On the other, Camilla's children, appearing steadily, almost unassumingly without titles, yet not without influence. And that is why Laura's slip is unsettling. If Camilla is indeed ensuring her family's place, then perhaps these public moments were never courtesy, but milestones in a quiet ascent. A rise in the shadows, preparing the public to accept what comes next. Stay tuned, because what followed shook the palace to its core. The palace in panic. When Laura's words entered the public domain, Buckingham Palace found itself in an awkward bind. The comment wasn't from a critic or commentator, it came from the Queen Consort's own daughter. That fact alone made it impossible to dismiss. Inside palace walls, where every word is weighed, the question was immediate. Had Laura simply spoken carelessly, or had she revealed something the monarchy was desperate to contain? For the royal staff, the timing couldn't have been worse. The crown relies on narrative control. Every photo, every line in a press release, every word from a royal mouth is curated. To have an unguarded remark escape from a family member outside the inner circle was their nightmare. Insiders whispered that aides rushed to limit the damage. Could it be softened? Explained away as family pride? Behind closed doors, however, the mood was sharper. Courtiers have long memories, and many connected Laura's words directly to the decades of rumors shadowing Camilla. To them, it looked less like a daughter's mistake and more like truth spoken too casually. If Camilla truly is securing her family's place, then the monarchy's hierarchy is being challenged from within. King Charles himself faced a difficult position. He has always been protective of Camilla and, by extension, her children, who have lived much of their adult lives under scrutiny they never sought. Yet, as king, he is custodian of the crown, responsible for ensuring its survival. To ignore Laura's words risked appearing weak. To confront them risked confirming suspicions of Camilla's influence. Princess Anne, with her blunt pragmatism, reportedly made her stance clear. Though no comments were confirmed, palace observers believe she had little patience for blunders that taint the crown. It is easy to imagine her warning Charles that such a slip, if unchecked, could spiral into a narrative of hidden agendas. In the end, the palace reacted, as it always does in quiet crises: silence, followed by redirection. No statement, no correction. Instead, attention shifted to upcoming engagements, burying Laura's words beneath fresh headlines. But within the palace, unease lingered. For once spoken, her words could not be unsaid. They hovered like a storm cloud, impossible to clear away. And in that silence, Buckingham Palace confirmed what many already suspected. The remark had struck a nerve. And if the palace could bury the comment in headlines, William and Catherine could not bury the fear it raised. Keep watching, because their reaction revealed more than silence ever could. William and Catherine caught off guard. If staff felt unsettled, the response at Kensington Palace was even more pointed. For William and Catherine, cut not only at the institution they will one day lead, but at their deepest fears for their children's future. William, shaped by years of preparing for kingship, has always been wary of family dynamics within the monarchy. He lived through his parents' storm, saw Camilla vilified, and learned how public narratives can be rewritten. Laura's words reopened an old wound: the fear that Camilla's influence could one day interfere with his rightful place as king. In William's eyes, monarchy requires clarity. One throne, one line of succession, one future for Camilla's daughter to suggest. Her family will soon have their place felt dangerously close to blurring those lines. It was, in William's mind, a challenge not only to him, but to Diana's legacy, his bloodline, and above all, his children George, Charlotte, and Louis. Catherine's reaction, though calmer, was no less troubled. Praised for her ability to steady the monarchy, she too could not ignore the implications. To her, the crown is fragile, surviving centuries only through careful adaptation. Any notion of Camilla carving out a dynasty for her own children threatened that balance. Catherine's worry was not abstract, it was maternal. George is already stepping into the role of future king. Charlotte admired for her poise, Louis celebrated for his charm. Every step of their lives has been crafted to prepare them for royal duty. If Camilla's children rise beside them, Catherine fears it could muddy the story. Who then represents the monarchy's future? William and Catherine's heirs, or Camilla's bloodline. Camilla's bloodline. Vigilance became the unspoken rule. For William, it meant guarding the line of succession as untouchable. For Catherine, it meant ensuring the monarchy's image remained united, not fractured. Yet behind palace doors, quiet frustration brewed, just as the institution seemed to be finding stability after years of scandal. Camilla's family had ignited a fresh wave of uncertainty. Outwardly, William and Catherine remained the picture of composure, smiling, graceful, unshaken. But in private, Laura's casual remark lingered like an unwelcome ghost. It wasn't only about the words themselves, but the truth they hinted at. That Camilla's family no longer saw themselves as outsiders, but as rightful participants in a future most believed belonged solely to William's children. For Britain's future king and queen. That was an idea too dangerous to ignore. Anne and Charles, the confrontation. Where William and Catherine's unease stayed hidden, Princess Anne's reaction was anything but subtle. Known for her blunt pragmatism, Anne has always had little patience for rumors, especially those that threaten the crown's integrity. When Laura Lopes's comments spread through the press, Anne reportedly wasted no time confronting the issue. Head-on silence was not an option. Insiders claim the confrontation unfolded during one of those tense private family meetings where voices rise. Truths are spoken and emotions run high. Anne, in her trademark directness, demanded clarity. Was it true? Was Camilla really carving out space for her children within the monarchy? Was Laura's remark simply careless, or had she exposed conversations happening regularly in Camilla's household? Camilla, rarely one to bow under pressure, defended herself fiercely. She may have argued that her children had every right to attend family occasions, that their presence was about personal support, not political strategy. But Anne's pointed questions struck deeper. If it was merely about family pride, why had Laura spoken with such certainty? Why use the words "making sure," as though influence were quietly being exercised behind the scenes? King Charles stood in the most agonizing position of all. On one side was his sister Anne, the woman he has long trusted for her unshakable loyalty to the crown. On the other stood Camilla, the partner he had waited decades to marry, the woman whose reputation he had fought tirelessly to legitimize in the eyes of both the public and the institution. For Charles, the choice was cruel: defend his wife's honor or safeguard the monarchy's long-term stability. According to whispers from insiders, the exchange was ten-seated, even, and argued that the monarchy could not withstand fresh fractures at a time when public trust was already fragile. The mere perception of Camilla promoting her children risked fueling narratives of self-interest and casting doubt over William's future reign. Charles, torn, reportedly urged calm. Though he may not have directly rebuked Camilla, those close to the palace believe he quietly acted to contain the damage. In the weeks that followed, subtle changes were impossible to miss. Laura and Tom's visibility dimmed. Their invitations became fewer, their seating less prominent. It was as if an invisible hand had pulled them back into the shadows, ensuring the spotlight returned firmly to William, Catherine, and their children. No official explanation was given, but the shift was undeniable. For Charles, it was a silent compromise. No public rebuke of Camilla, but a decisive move to protect the monarchy's future. For Anne, it was proof that the crown still came before personal loyalties. And for Camilla, it was a chilling reminder that while her influence was vast, it was not limitless. The confrontation may never be spoken of openly, yet its echoes linger. An invisible line has been drawn inside the royal household, a boundary of ambition that can never be crossed, And if one stray remark can redraw invisible lines, what happens when those lines begin to threaten the crown itself? What this means: for the monarchy, Laura Lopes's seemingly innocent comment was only a handful of words, but the ripple effect has been seismic. In them, many see the shadow of a hidden power struggle, a clash not just of personalities, but of futures. The monarchy has always survived by projecting unity, at least outwardly. But Camilla's supposed ambitions for her children have introduced a dangerous fracture. If her family gains visibility, the institution risks creating two centers of gravity, one led by William and Catherine, the rightful heirs, and another subtly tied to Camilla's bloodline. For William, the threat is crystal clear. His reign depends on a seamless transfer of authority and an unquestionable line of succession. Any perception that Camilla's family is being elevated could blur that clarity. For Catherine, the fear is just as personal. George, Charlotte, and Louis have been carefully raised as the monarchy's future. If Camilla's grandchildren are pushed forward, the spotlight dangerously divides. For Charles, this moment reveals the fragility of his reign. He fought decades to secure Camilla's acceptance, but if that acceptance begins to fracture the institution, history may not remember him kindly. So what does this mean for the monarchy? At its heart lies a question too heavy to ignore. Can two families share influence without sowing division? Or is this the beginning of a silent power struggle that could weaken the very throne William is destined to inherit? The lingering question: in the end, it all circles back to one moment: Laura Lopes speaking casually, perhaps without thought, letting slip the words, "Mom's making sure the family will soon have their place." Were they harmless chatter, or a glimpse into conversations whispered behind the closed doors of Clarence House? Inside the palace, the fallout is already real. Staff scramble to manage narratives. William and Catherine guard their children's future more tightly and presses for clarity. Charles walks the impossible line between loyalty to his wife and duty to the crown. And Camilla, composed, enigmatic, remains unreadable. Her private ambitions left for speculation. But the question now extends beyond palace walls. What if Laura's slip was no accident? What if it was the crack in the wall, an unfiltered glimpse into a plan long concealed? Could this be the opening chapter of the monarchy's most dangerous internal struggle? Camilla's bloodline set against Diana's heirs, the monarchy has always depended on perception, on the belief that succession is unquestionable. Yet, in a single remark, that certainty has been shaken. So, the question remains, not just for Britain, but for the world watching closely: was Laura's slip careless chatter? Or will history one day remember it as the moment the palace walls began to crack? What do you think? Did Queen Camilla's daughter finally confirm the rumors of hidden ambition, or was it nothing more than an innocent mistake? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more royal revelations.